Hello there, very good evening and welcome to Government in Transition. I'm your host, Eddie Lane. I'm joined this evening by Joe Hamilton, a candidate for the People's Progressive Party Civic, Dr. Vindhya Persaud. She is a Central Committee member of the PPP and also a candidate for the People's Progressive Party Civic. And of course, Sanjeev Datadin, attorney at law and a candidate as well for the party. Lady, gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the program.
Hi, Eddie.
Good evening.
Good evening, colleagues and viewers. Good evening.
Good evening, all. Good evening to your viewers. Good evening, Ed, Vindy, Joe.
All right. So
good evening again to all of you and those who are looking.
All right. So let's get straight into some business. The Ghana Elections Commission met today. They had a very long meeting. Well, the first session starting at 10 a.m. and I think somewhere around 12 or 12:30, they had a recess for lunch, and then they resumed, I think, about 2 o'clock. And on resumption, that session of the meeting lasted not very long. But there are a number of things that came out of that meeting. There was a motion, I understand, on the table to have the chief elections officer, who has been insubordinate, clearly insubordinate, to have him dismissed. There was also the report with the fraudulent numbers from Mingo that were presented by the chief elections officer in his final report, despite being told repeatedly by the chair that he should present the numbers based on the recount. A number of things happened, as I said, and one of them, very, very significant, is the fact that the chair has now completely ruled null and void the 10 declarations that were prepared, inclusive of the fraudulent one by Claimant Mingo on the 13th of March. Those were in abeyance, and after the recount, there wasn't a decision. I think Lowenfield was trying to capitalize on that because there wasn't a decision in them. And what happened today is that the chair would have removed those 10 declarations. So what is left now is really the recount figures, the 10 certificates of recount for the 10 districts. That is exactly what is left for the basis of a declaration. I understand also that the chair has again instructed the CEO to prepare his report based on those declarations. And he has to submit that report at 2 tomorrow when the commission meets again. There are other decisions, but I'll allow you, my guests, to speak to some of them. I want to start with you, Sanjeev, from a legal perspective, because we know those declarations were in abeyance. Now that they have been removed, if you can speak to the legal issues surrounding this and where we are at the moment.
All right, Ed. As I understand it from speaking to Sace Gunraj, our commissioner, the position is this. There was this, the previous declaration, the March 13 declaration from Mr. Mingo, which was being held in abeyance by the commission. They didn't actually strike it down as they struck down the March 5th declarations. Today, the chair decided that, look, as it relates to that, those will be struck out, so they are gone. So the figures produced that included Mingo's figures can no longer be used or relied upon by the commission. I think what happened is essentially the chairwoman, Justice Claudette Singh, decided that what she would do is, having met with the full commission and Mr. Lowenfield as relates to the reports that he has been giving, she explained very clearly that what is required is he has to produce the reports from the recount. So all the other things that is being said is, or all the things that appeared to have been troubling his mind before, she's essentially cleared the decks. She's made it clear there is no other figures as far as GCOM is concerned that relates to this election, except the recount. And what I need you to do is to do your job. Tabulate it, add it up, tell me what are the seat allocations, and let the commission deliberate upon it. So the effect of what happened is we have, of course, as we all know, if you look at social media, they're running away with various things about the CCJ judgment, especially about the recount order not being valid, which of course is false, but we'll deal with that a little later. But Ed, the position is, as it stands now, the chairwoman, Justice Claudia Singh, said essentially, what had happened is he had originally embarked upon this validity issue where he took an invitation from the Court of Appeal, apparently, or he took guidance from the Court of Appeal. The basic thing is that the CCJ has ruled clearly that validity has already been determined by the people who count the ballots. There is no one else, nobody in GCOM, not the chairwoman, not the CEO, not a commissioner, nobody can decide on anything now about validity except a judge. So that is all gone. So we don't have that issue no more. The statements from the court was clear. There is nothing else left. Now, what she has taken an approach, I know that there are divergent views about people saying, why give him another chance, or why not give him another chance, and why not move forward? But that's a decision that the commission is constitutionally empowered to do. Now, don't be fooled about people saying that she can't direct him. And they're referring to parts of Article 177 that says it's on this exclusive or the sole advice of the CEO. Article 161 and Article 162 are very clear. The commission can direct any officer. They can hire and fire, and they can direct any officer to do that which they have decided is fair and in the best interest of an election. This is not something that exactly that is 161A. And you can see the last part of the first paragraph, paragraph 1, states very clearly that they shall have the power to remove and exercise disciplinary control over staff. So these are not things that are confusing. And as I've said before, when they say advice of the CEO, his advice is the numbers. It's not anything else. It's not give advice on cricket. It's not to give advice on how to play football. These are not the things that he is there for. So what the chairwoman has now done is the space has been getting smaller. The room has been getting smaller for Mr. Lowenfield. And she has now essentially made it as small as possible so that he has only one path to go. He doesn't have to get confused about anything else. Whether he will do it, we have to wait and see. But she also put in a corollary that if he doesn't do it, she will ask the deputy to do it, which means that she will either fire Mr. Lowenfield or she will suspend him from his duties and appoint the deputy to perform the duties of the chief elections officer, because whoever it is that will be providing that report, we have to make sure that that person is at all material times the chief elections officer or performing the functions of the chief elections officer. So it was nothing complicated today. It was essentially a narrowing of what is going on, and Lowenfield has now been put on a very narrow path and a short leash, as we would say, and he needs to do what he's supposed to do.
What is interesting, Sanjeev, and I'm going to bring you in here now, Dr. Persaud, is the fact that, and you made the point that the chair has made it elusively clear, and I'm saying that for emphasis, that Mr. Lowenfield must follow the instructions, or she will be forced to delegate the responsibilities. Now, when it comes to the issue of delegating responsibilities, there has been a lot of talk about this, Sanjeev, and I'm trying to bring up Article 161 again, and just to share this paragraph here, and I'm going to read it for the public. So this is Article 161A2, and it says the Elections Commission may, by directions in writing and subject to such conditions as it thinks fit, delegate any of its powers under paragraph 1 to any or more of members of the commission, or by such directions and subject to such conditions as it thinks to delegate the powers to such officers of the commission as the commission may determine. I'm going to bring you in here now, Dr. Persaud, because that clearly talks about the power of the commission to delegate. And this is also related, Sanjeev, to another aspect of the misinformation that we're having from the APNU AFC with regards to the recount process. But we're going to come to that a little later. I'm going to bring you in here, Dr. Persaud.
Right. So I think today was a sense where most of the encumbrances perceived by Mr. Lowenfield that so far would have, in his mind, prevented him from declaring the results to the chair and the commission, as in terms of tabulating the certificates of the recount. He has now been backed into a corner because there has been a removal of all the obstacles that he sought to put in place to prevent him from doing that. And I think the chair was very clear today in that she said he cannot supersede the commission. In fact, he is bound by his office to follow the directives of the chair and the commission. So she has, in effect, removed any chance of him changing what he thinks or how he thinks, and removing any iota of doubt in the minds of anyone of what leeway he has. There is no wiggle room, as we want to say. I think now all there is to do with the removal of those previous certificates of the count, the original count, and now the directive is given specifically in accordance with CCJ, in accordance with everything that has gone on, to provide the tabulated figures of the recount. I don't think Mr. Lowenfield should in any way feel that he has a way out of this. And you know what bothers me in all of this? I think much of the country has known this for some time. Even people who are not legal officers would have seen this, would have known this. The international community has resoundingly said over and over again, just give the figures for the recount. And if all of these organizations, whether you consider the United Nations, the OAS, the Commonwealth, regionally CARICOM, if they can see that there is no need to have any disturbance in one's mind as to what should be done, then I think Mr. Lowenfield has taken a defiant and belligerent stance when he continues to, for want of a better word, let people fall dead, then resurrect them through the numbers he would have been providing in the reports that he would have given. I hope, like the rest of the country that has been in limbo, that he sees wisdom, he sees reason, and he comes with the report that we're all expecting at the designated time tomorrow. However, should he not do that, as Sanjeev explained, there is another recourse. And I think having access to that recourse opens up the opportunity for the right path to be embarked on. And I would like much of Guyana, I believe that he has been given a lot of latitude. I would have liked to see these steps taken earlier, but the point is now here. And tomorrow, like the rest of Guyana and the rest of the world, we're all waiting expectantly to see what will transpire.
Thanks, Dr. Persaud. Joe, I want to bring you in here, and I just want to re-emphasize a point that Dr. Persaud made just now with regards to us wanting to see maybe certain steps being taken earlier. And I want to say, you know, today, this is an opportunity with what the chair did, a final opportunity, I suspect, for Lowenfield to redeem himself. Based on what I know is that the PPP would have liked to see Lowenfield go today because he's been disrespectful He has been insubordinate, and he has abrogated powers onto himself that he doesn't have. But he got another opportunity from the chair today to redeem himself, Joe.
My thoughts on this matter is, as frustrating as it is, I think the chair is playing test cricket in the age of 2020, and that is what frustrates us. He's playing test match. To remind me, Eddie, you would not be old enough to know about a man named Roy Bachan used to play test cricket for the West Indies. There was a Guyanese batsman who the chair remind me of his disposition in the crease. And it is frustrating, but I suspect in everything that she's doing, her legal mind is working. I think that is what is happening there. And what I can say to viewers tonight is that we're closer to the end of this matter. Because as Sanjeev has just indicated, and Vindhya, he has no more pretend confusion anymore. It's not that he was confused, but he was pretending that he was confused because his handlers, they were putting that forward. The narrative of his handlers and his behavior coincided, and he knew. And if you recall, Adrian Sanders, the president of the court, before he gave his judgment, he traced this matter from where it started and what has happened and how we got to recount and all the issues. And the understanding from everyone was that once we have the recount done, the numbers that came out of the recount would have superseded everything else. Even Vincent Alexander during the recount acknowledged that the declaration will be from the recount, but deliberately so, they sought to put all of these obstacles and alleged confusion before the chair. And as my two colleagues have said, what she has done is to strip him of the so-called confusion. In the parlance of playing cards or dominoes, is taking away cards that he cannot play. He can't play them anymore. Mischievously, he cannot play them anymore. And therefore, now, all of this, she's saying, listen, you're not paying attention at all to statements of polls anymore. The only thing we're paying attention to, if you want to get right down to the bottom of it, is to SOR, statements of recount. We're not paying attention anymore to RO's declaration in the districts. We are paying attention only to the coordinator's declaration, and that is signed off on at the convention center. So the only thing you have to pay attention to, sir, I am helping you to help yourself, hopefully, is the numbers that were tabulated via these 10 certificates and the recount exercise. Now, if Mr. Lowenfield refuses tomorrow to submit that report, either by staying away, which he is likely to do, or he refused to, no more there can be anything stopping GCOM, in my view, from firing him, because there would be no, misinterpretation anymore, and that it would be total insubordination, because he has nothing else to confuse him that he says was confusing him. So if he refuses tomorrow to submit that report, then GCOM must act. And importantly, the chair discarded the reports coming out of the statement of poll, the motion taken to the commission by Ropes and Ben was not discarded. So it is still there. They discussed it, and she did not discard it. So that motion can be resurrected tomorrow if Lowenfield is insubordinate, and he will be dealt with. And I suspect, as I understand it, the chair has already indicated that if he fails to, she would ask Myers to submit the report. And we see how that go. But the point is, I can say to viewers again that we just need some more patience. This is closer to the end than it has ever been. It is closer to the end. We are far away from where we were last week, Friday and Saturday. We're far away today because even some of Lowenfield backers at this moment, if he refuses or fails to show up to submit that report tomorrow, they couldn't anymore support him because it would be blatant insubordination. And I think Sanjeev mentioned some time ago that he can be summarily dismissed. There isn't any, and as I repeat, the motion is still there. And so I say, you know, as frustrating as it is, citizens, we're accustomed to 2020. The chair is playing test cricket, and therefore we have to continue to watch the game and watch our stroke play. And some of the reservations we have had even up until Saturday, because none of us was sure as to what will happen today. You know, we wanted Lowenfield to be fired, but I think as much as he wasn't fired, the chair has backed him in a corner, and she has taken all the cards. She has all the cards to play. He has none anymore to play. And therefore, we see how tomorrow 2:30 goes, and we'll go from there.
Joe, interestingly, while you keep emphasizing that, you know, the chair is playing test cricket, what we can say, Sanjeev, and Sanjeev, you will know too, is that we are in the 5th day, probably the last session of the 5th day. So even though it's test cricket, the match is coming to an end, and we don't see a draw here. We don't see a draw here. We see an outright win, and that outright win will be Team People's Progressive Party Civic, because you've made the point. Matter of fact, all three of you have made the point that while a lot of people didn't recognize how significant today was and the decision taken, is that Lowenfield can no longer say, I need clarity. Because you don't have a number of different sets of numbers to work with. What he has is the recount figures. So if he is confused about that, then certainly if they don't need to, if they don't want to fire him for insubordination, then they can fire him for incompetence if he's not clear with those numbers. So I would want to believe that while you said test cricket, we're in the last session. Today was the session before tea. Tomorrow is the final session of the 5th day. So I think we are seeing all of this coming to an end. And like you rightly said, Lowenfield has a final chance. And I think Myers, she has a chance too. If Lowenfield has to go and she gets the opportunity, I guess she will get a chance to see, or well, she would have already seen the fate of Lowenfield. And what is also important that not because Lowenfield, if he refuses or he fails to submit his report tomorrow, Lowenfield still has to keep at the back of his mind that there are 3 private criminal charges against him. And we have made the point repeatedly that all the people who are egging him on behind the scenes and are saying, those guys, the one that now has to pay the media some monies because of that false accusation, the one in New York and the others, the reality is they're not going to be in the docks with him. They're not going to even be in the court with him. And certainly they're not going to be in the cell with him. So he has to make that decision, whether he wants to go there. And certainly, as we've been saying, it's strange that Lowenfield is holding out so much. And I don't think, like you said some time ago, Joe, it can't be the land at Millie's hideout that is keeping Lowenfield motivated to do this. And I think we would want to know at some point what exactly has been motivating him to hold out like this, to want to rig an election despite the world knows what happens. But the other issue I want us to move to, because, and this is where the misinformation, the lies of the changing narrative, and the propaganda of this desperate cabal is really kicking in. They have been singing, by the way, before I move to that, maybe I should say to you that I listened to Alexander today. This man went into the meeting, argued in defense of the fraudulent report that Lowenfield put in. When the chair decided that she is going to put aside, remove from the equation those fraudulent numbers from Lowenfield, Alexander emerged and said he now thinks that there should be a non-declaration. And this is the kind of changing narrative. This is the kind of, it's either we get it or no one else gets it. That is the position that they have been taking, and they have been changing the narrative. One of them, Sanjeev, because I'm going to bring you in back here, is the fact that they have been lying to their supporters. They're going into the Caribbean on regional media houses and lie about what the CCJ did in terms of the recount order and the recount. But before I ask for your comment, maybe I should share this here, and I'll probably put this up. You can go through it, and then we have some discussions. Sanjeev.
Thank you, Ed. Ed, you see, this is the part of the judgment that is very clear, and what it says essentially. The last line beginning with unless. Unless an election court decides otherwise, the votes counted by the recount process as valid votes are incapable of being declared invalid by any person or authority. So if you are taking from that, as you could see, the blue writing that you see on top of the page, that's the case number. That's what page of the record it is from the Caribbean Court of Justice. And the other numbers that you see is how it will be cited in the future, 2020 CCJ 10AJ. Okay, so this is from the official record of what is in the decision. Now, what I heard, parts of what Vincent Alexander, like you were saying, and he was trying to read parts of the judgment, and he's trying to interpret things that are not there. Those words of the judgment are so clear. You don't need to be a lawyer. The court is simply saying, look, man, the only people who can determine validity have determined validity already. And this is why it's so, Ed, it's very logical. Validity is dependent on the ballots. So you have to look at the ballots. When you look at the ballots, you make a determination. This ballot is valid, this ballot is not. How do you determine invalidity? The legislation section 98 provides for that. And how do you do it? You look at it, if it doesn't have the security features on it, because our ballot papers are like money, so they put a light over it if they don't see it, if it doesn't have the watermarks, the marks that it's supposed to have, then it's not a GCOM ballot, so it can't count. If the intention can be discerned when you look at the ballot, then it's a valid ballot. If, however, someone went in and marked every box, then it's a spoiled vote. But the ballots are, that's what it is. Now, how can Lowenfield go back and revisit a decision made by an eyewitness, a man who is looking at the ballot and deciding for himself, this is a valid ballot, And Lowenfield wants to go, not having seen the ballot, and he decides whether the ballot is valid or not. Now, this is a fundamental principle of law, that if you are not the witness, you cannot adjudicate on it. So if an election petition is filed, and if they decide to challenge the result, those ballots are going to come into the court, and the court is going to look at them, and the court is going to hear what you have to say about them, and the court will make a decision. So essentially, and that's why the CCJ tried to explain to them and try to explain to everyone that all of these concerns you have about the validity, GCOM looked at it and decided it already, and GCOM is not divisible. The Secretariat is not divisible. Lowenfield is not different from the RO, is not different from the DRO to the polling agent to the clerk. The act of one is the act of all. So if they have made the decision, he's essentially sitting on appeal from them, and he has no power to do that. He's their supervisor, their ultimate supervisor, but he can't sit on appeal from what they do without looking at the ballot himself. Now, he cannot, he has no mechanism in law to do that. And that is why the CCJ has been trying to disabuse everyone's mind that as far as validity is concerned of the ballot, that's been decided already. And there is no way for it to be revisited until you get to a judge. The other thing that they're tying with that, and they're trying to say, and they have been peddling since Lowenfield adopted essentially Mingo 2 numbers, but different. I mean, even copying it, they did wrong. But essentially, it's close to Mingo number 2 numbers, which is the 13th of March declaration numbers. What was the issue? They're saying that the court said that Order 60 could not change any law, and therefore it was invalid. So if the recount was invalid, you have to go back to the order, what was being held in abeyance. Well, I think that was put to rest because the chairwoman said nothing that was held in abeyance is valid anymore. So we're only left with the recount. But let me explain to you. In paragraph 39 of the judgment, the Caribbean Court of Justice was at great pains to explain that Order 60, 38 and 39, Order 60 was crafted because of the problems that arose and carefully crafted so that they can produce a process and a mechanism within the law to address what was going on. And as you could see of 39, the aim at transparency included a variety of measures. Now you recall under Article 132, 162, the GCOM can take any step to ensure transparency. And they went through the workstation, they carried it out, the audiovisual facilities, they go on to it. But if you look at the bottom, the part that says, it says the ascertained and verified matrix was to be signed by the district coordinator for the district, and the signed matrix was to be transmitted to the CEO, whose responsibility it was to tabulate the matrices of the 10 electoral district and submit it to the commission, a report together with a summary of the observations. So they made it very clear that was his job. Add it up. He don't understand tabulation, add it up. Matrices confuse you, take the forms, add them up. That's all that was required. Now, the court went on to say that it is elementary that the order that was made cannot amend the statutes or the Constitution because of the hierarchy of legislation. And the court was went at lengths to say, look, you can't do that and amend your Constitution. But the court, in reference to that, to be as kind and as respectful as I can be of the Court of Appeal, what the court was essentially saying, that it is elementary that you should know that you cannot interpret or change the Constitution by what was put in Order 60, was really a knock on what the Court of Appeal did, because the Court of Appeal was trying to take what Order 60 said should happen and interpret Article 177 of the Constitution. And the court essentially said, look, it's elementary, you can't do that. That is false legal reasoning, and that is essential legal stupidity. So it was, in fact, a very harsh words to the majority of the Court of Appeal. That's what the court was referring to. The court didn't want to single out and be, I was thinking abusive, but the court didn't want to be very rude. So they said it's elementary. If you did that, that don't apply. And if you're saying that, you can't do that. So everywhere you did that or said that, let's pretend that let's just put that aside, because as a general rule, you cannot do that. The recount order, Order 60, is valid. The recount order would be invalid to any extent it is inconsistent with the Constitution. But as Justice Saunders pointed out, that didn't arise because the court wasn't called to interpret Order 60. The court was called to interpret the Constitution. And again, you heard Vincent Alexander saying that the orders that were made by the court have nothing to do with Order 60, but Order 60 doesn't stand. He doesn't say how he comes to that conclusion, but he was going through what were the orders the court made. And that the court, he was trying to say the court was being encouraged to make further orders, but the court was saying we can't make further orders, but they don't need to make further orders. Because if we remove the foolish interpretation that puts the word valid when it's obviously valid, then what's the point? As you could see, the court doesn't need to do it. The rule in law is ex nihil nihil fit. From nothing comes nothing. So if the order of the Court of Appeal falls, and that is declared to be a nullity, then everything that acted upon that order is similarly a nullity because it has no leg to stand on. So the argument, you see what they do with the argument too, Ed, is they give you a halfway point. Nobody completes the argument, because the minute you take the argument to their logical conclusion, they're exposed for the stupidity that they are. You muted.
Yeah, Dr. Persaud, I'll bring you in here because I think, Sanjeev, you've put into context the legal arguments here with regards to this changing narrative and the attempts to more or less sell the argument or the case that somehow the CCJ would have basically ruled that the recount order was illegal. I brought up just now the orders of the court, and nothing in the orders said anything about the, and maybe I should bring that back, Dr. Persaud, as you come in here and just quickly go through. The court orders that A, special leave is granted to the applicants to appeal the decision of the Court of Appeal dated June 2020. The appeal of the applicants is allowed, and the said decision of the Court of Appeal was made without jurisdiction, is invalid and of no effect. The court declares that the report of the Chief Elections Officer of 23rd June 2020 is similarly of no effect. The last order is that the court shall receive written submission on cost on or before the 22nd of July 2020. So clearly there is nothing there that speaks to any order dealing with the recount order. Dr. Persaud.
Right. Yeah, I don't think the court was ambiguous in anything that it said. And as I keep saying, reiterating, their judgment was pellucid, and all that he has to do is to tabulate what has been given to him through the recount that was witnessed by those who participated and who conducted it and those who observed it. And based on that and that alone, the seats should be assigned. So there is no confusion in my mind, and I don't think there is confusion in all right-thinking person's mind about how this needs to play out. But what bothers me, and I digress here a little bit, is that we have one man who has held this country to ransom. And he is a statutory officer who is mandated to do a simple act that determines where the country should go. And he continues. And I do believe he feels somewhat shielded by those in the APNU, that he can act and act with impunity. But again, I believe that he must be held accountable for his actions. And I think anyone who has been looking on at this whole proceeding and seeing the manner in which he continues to violate orders, he continues to be insubordinate, and if he continues to do that tomorrow, I think the chair should act decisively. And I think she has taken us to this point where she will, at least I hope so. And we can see this state that we have been put into, given a rest once and for all, because it is a country that has been fragmented. And I really want to belabor this point. The country has been fragmented because of the continuous narrative that is being spun by the APNU FC, telling their supporters everything that is different to what has been directed by the CCJ and what has transpired at GCOM. And it has led to their supporters believing that they have won the elections. And when we look at the newspapers and how it has been utilized, I mean, I think these things need to be said. It has been utilized to change what is in effect happening and transpiring in the country. I think it's a dangerous thing that they're doing, because what it is contributing to is the polarization of a nation. And it is something that should bother every Guyanese, because elections, they come, they go, and it gives every person a chance to express what it is they want for themselves and their country in terms of their vote. So for Mr. Lowenfield to continuously defy everything that he has been instructed, he continues to really act against the country to which we all belong. And when we look at the way in which people have been responding to each other after every meeting at GCOM, or after everything that has been said, we see the vitriol that is being spewed. And it's very disturbing to me. I don't know about you, Eddie, but it bothers me, because we have seen people, you know, against each other. And this is because of what has been told to them that is furthest from the truth. And when we start to go in a direction where we deviate from the truth, and we do that merely to have a stranglehold on power, which is not ours to have at this point in time, because the electorate has spoken, the recount has happened. There's no going back to change the validity of the recount. There's no going back to challenge the validity of the recount. The CCJ, to which we subscribe, that highest court has pronounced. The chair has removed all of the arguments in favor of anything else. So I think the path is clear. And for anyone to, at this point in time, act in contravention of what has been prescribed by the law and even by the court orders, I think then they are least of what we consider, I'm not even going to say a patriot, they're least of what we consider someone who is acting as they should in the office that they hold. And I speak directly to Mr. Lowenfield here. No one is trying to say that maybe, you know, he was confused. There is no confusion. There is no confusion. And I feel that he must be held accountable at the end of the day. There are criminal charges that have been filed. We'll see where that will go. But I believe right now the country has had enough. People are very frustrated, and the elections impasse that we find ourselves in comes at a time when the world is dealing with the challenge of COVID. I need to say this because in addition to COVID, there is an economic problem, instability, and economic issue in the country where people are unable to earn as they can and as they should. And in the background of all of this, I think for Mr. Lowenfield and those from the APNU AFC to hold on to a narrative that further chokes the life out of this country, they cannot want anything that is good for people. And I believe their supporters should call them out on this, Eddie. I really think so. Because today I was looking at a video where they were trying to gain some level of acknowledgement from the president, and he just went past. And I think they need to call their leaders to task, because Here are people, Mr. Lowenfield, acting on the directive, and I will go out and say political directive. Then people are supporting the APNU AFC based on the narrative they have spun. But when it comes to a simple acknowledgement, when it comes to truth from their leaders, then we see that that is totally lacking. And it is something that I hope that they're looking at and they're seeing. Because if they feel strongly about this, then they should ask their leaders to simply tell the truth. And truth seems to be the furthest thing from the minds of those on the other side. And I'm a believer in truth. And I think once we allow the truth to be trampled on, just as we've seen the onslaught and the assault on democracy in our country, then we are in a lot of trouble. So I would like to, at this point, appeal to everyone who's looking, don't hate on each other. We are all going to live here, whatever happens going forward. We all have to live here. But we need to look at everything that has transpired. Just read the CCJ judgment. There's a chronological detail of everything that has happened. Read it for yourself. Don't listen to a narrative, and it's pellucid. And it comes to the point that we are at now as a country, where GCOM is at, where Mr. Lowenfield has to prepare and present his report, merely tabulating the certificates of recount, nothing else. From that, he does the calculation to assign the seats, and the chair can declare elections. That's all that is left, in my opinion.
Thanks, Dr. Persaud. Joe, I bring you in here. We've been talking a lot about the changing narrative.
No, again, you know, Sanjeev is a cricketer. I don't know how good he is. I know he went to. But the point is here, you have a game that was played, and a referee, an umpire rather, is trying to give the win to the team that make 215 runs. When the winning team made 233 runs. I mean, you think about that. And that is what is the attempt here over the last 4 months. APNU AFC made 215 runs. PPP Civic made 233 runs. And this umpire is attempting to give them the game. And I don't know why Congress plays sting that Freedom House would have just said, "Boy, y'all take the game." I mean, you know, with all the effort, all of us that are on this program tonight and all of our colleagues around this country, with all the work and the effort we put in, going up the mountains and in the streams and the rivers, day and night, leaving your families for days, sometimes weeks. You understand me? I don't know, they believe that, you know, we would just say, you know, because you all are creating ruckus, you win the game with the 215. Secondly, Lowenfield in this last report that he submitted last week attempted to stuff the ballot box after the counting, because the counting happened and you had 460,000 votes in valid votes, plus about 5,000 invalid votes. So you had total in the boxes was 465,000 ballots. This man presents a report with 479 ballots. Normally, the PNC, in the days of Burnham rigging, they stuffed the ballot box before. Lowenfield is stuffing the ballot box for them after the counting. That is what he attempted to do with this 479 number that he put before the commission. The other important thing is, and Vindhya talk about their narrative and Sanjeev and Eddie to some. The question is, which one of the narratives? Because whilst Alexander is saying annul the elections, Trotman is saying, let's talk. Eva James Bond is saying, pick up the phone and call. Nagamoto Sunday saying, let me discuss shared governance, power sharing. So which one of the narrative? They even can't keep it together. So you don't know what let us assume we, the People's Progressive Party, say we decide to take these lying, cheating, thieving people seriously. Which one of the things they're saying we will take seriously? That is the problem we have. Which one of the things? Because in the last 48 hours from since Saturday, about 5, 6 different things their leaders they have said. So we don't know which one. And Vindhya, in passing, mentioned Granger today, not even acknowledging his supporters, for that matter. And that is what happens to leaders that are liars and deceivers. Your own people turn back against you, and that was predicted. What you saw there this afternoon is angry people whose leader has run out of lies and deceit that he couldn't even come out to have a conversation with them. Because what can he say to them now? Up until yesterday, and I suspect this morning, they were holding on to these numbers that the chair threw out the window. And Trotman, up to yesterday, was saying that even though the numbers are wrong and fabricated, GCOM must accept it. I mean, you know, you wonder if these guys even went to nursery school to say things like that. You know, that a man falsified numbers. It is not legal, it is not legitimate, and his superior officers, they must accept it. What foolishness is that? So we are at a place where we don't know what they want. Nobody knows what they want. And I suspect in the next couple of days, my prediction is Granger would be in hiding because the game has run out on him. He don't know what to say to them. Remember last week, Friday, I think it was Friday, he came out and had a conversation with them because he still had expectation. Because remember, he said to them, you know, the matter is back with GCOM. And at that time, resting at GCOM was Lowenfield fraudulent report. So today, the only report to consider is the report coming out of the recount tabulation. So what Granger said to them, that's the reason why he had to be protected by his bodyguards among his own people. And that is the reason why he couldn't come out to say anything to them. And I predict that it will get worse in the next couple of days for the leadership of the PNC. And Congress Place is likely to see some of the same issues you had when they had the Congress some time ago. Because people were lied to, people were deceived over the last 4 months. And therefore, they will call their leaders to account, and rightfully so.
But Joe, the issue that you have is, while I understand what you were saying, it seems as though these guys are not coming to the realization that they have run out of options to or lies to tell the people. So they continue to make all sorts of claims, including attacking every single person that speaks out against what is happening. And we have seen what has happened over the last 4 months. And I keep using almost every evening because I think every single Guyanese, particularly those from the countryside, can connect with this example. There is this game that you play as kids, and it ends with, I'm trying to remember the exact words, how it started, but it ends with the cheese stands alone. You guys should remember that game. And I think this is what is happening. Granger and his cabal, they're like the cheese standing alone. The OAS has spoken. The European Union has spoken. The Commonwealth has spoken. The US, Canada, CARICOM, the only people who are having a different view on a different narrative is Granger and his gang. And even to that, the lie that they're talking, they can't get right. Because you have 7 different numbers, 5 of which came from Lowenfield and Mingo, and the 5 are all different. So every time Lowenfield submits a report with fraudulent numbers, he changes the numbers. You had the one where he attempted to disenfranchise 270 plus 1,000 people. Then he brought that down to 115. Then he went back up and he had almost 15,000 on Saturday in his report that he submitted. You had Mingo doing the same thing. The one at Ashman's building was different from the one at Kingston. And then you have every day, one day Granger is saying there were irregularities in the elections. The next day he is saying that we won the elections. Then he returned to saying that the elections were fraudulent. And so in my view, I would want to say that I think when you look at everything that is happening, I can only conclude that the APNU AFC cabal, every single one of them, they're running mad. I'm serious, they're running mad, because when you listen to what these people say, I mean, a nursery school child would ask, what are you saying? You're not making sense. You know, you look at Basil Williams' explanation the other day about the recount order in the Chronicle. You know, it's crazy. These are a bunch of mad people we're dealing with. I mean, how could you give them power to run a country when they are mad? How could you? Think about it. They are trying to attack the recount process. They're trying to attack the CCJ. They're attacking CARICOM. These people have already spoken. They've already spoken, and the numbers are out there. The PPPC received 233,336 votes, APNU 217,920. You cannot change the figures. You cannot change the ballots. They were counted for the public to see. You had the audio feed, and then you had the tabulation taking place with a video feed. Come on. I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to wrap things up. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Persaud.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned, you see, it's like children. It's like in sport, any sport. If you don't get what you want, you say one or two things. Either you cheat me, or I'm not playing with you anymore.
Or you and do this like is what when they play cricket. When they out, they pick up the bat and ball and they go home. Game is over.
Right. Right. So let's look at the region, CARICOM. CARICOM was invited here by none other than President Granger. All went well until CARICOM gave exactly as they saw it, a very, very balanced report stating exactly what transpired. Then CARICOM became public enemy number 1. And you have to admire Prime Minister, and at that time head of CARICOM, Prime Minister Mia Mottley, because she was frank and she said it as she saw it or as she read it. And she had the authority to pronounce because the report emanated from CARICOM. Then they started to use the most disparaging remarks against her. Now their sights have been turned on the members of CARICOM. And the latest we have heard is Mr. Trotman. And, you know, he's using the worst descriptions to speak about the islands as not having much to offer. But I mean, we are all part of CARICOM, and it is very irresponsible to have that kind of commentary emanating from a former minister of government, a former speaker, and someone in the leadership of the APNU AFC. So in essence, what they have said to the world, to the people of Guyana, is if you don't agree with any one of our changing narratives, any one of these fabricated numbers coming out of the reports from before Lowenfield, Mingo, then you must be wrong. There must be something wrong with you. There must be something wrong with your logic, your acumen, and everything that you are basing your arguments, your statements on. But how could much of the international community be so wrong? How could the people of Guyana, who I have to really congratulate the people of Guyana, they have borne all of this with forbearance, they've been patient, they've been very stressed while they're doing this. And yet they're waiting for some sense to prevail, some reason to prevail, where they can get on with their life and the country can move forward. And yet we find the APNU AFC constantly pushing our patients and making everyone feel as if somehow or the other they missed something that the rest of the world saw and accepted. And I really want to say, whatever happens going forward, I'd like the people of Guyana to not be duped by the narrative coming out of APNU FC. I know that everyone has their political preference as they are entitled to. They've voted in a particular way. But at the end of the day, look at what has happened from the time you voted to now and make your own deductions. Everyone out there can do that, and people should not be gullible and led by their noses just because they follow a certain thing. At the end of the day, what needs to triumph in this process is democracy. At the end of the day, what needs to triumph is this. In this whole scenario, there must be legality. At the end of the day, what needs to triumph in all of this is truth. And if these things are lost in the melee that is ensuing every time you hear of something and every time you wait for something, then we are doomed to an abyss of no return. So I'd like to call on all the Guyanese out there, all, whether you voted one way or another, look at this and look at what you want for your future. Look at what you want for the country. Look at what you want for the children. And speak out, advocate for the things that must be done. Hold your leaders accountable. Ensure that what you are getting is what you want. Ensure that what you're getting is the best for the country. And I believe when people are put in certain offices where they can hold the future of a country in their hands, they must be accountable to the people of that country. And that is why I hope with all my heart that tomorrow the chair will act decisively, that GCOM will act in a manner which will bring an end to what has transpired from March 2nd to now. The country can get back on track. We can have the legal government sworn in. We could not have this wrestle for power that is continuing, and we can have people understanding not only what sportsmanship is, but what good political grounds are. And it's the same thing. When elections will come around, some will get all of it, and the other side will have to work hard to get back wherever they want to go. That is what elections are about. And I do believe people want to see a level of political maturity that we're not seeing. We're not seeing that level of political maturity, but people would like to see it. We are in 2020. It's been a very difficult year. And I would like to see the year end in a manner where our country can progress and where we can see things like electoral reform happening in the future. So we're not back in this mess that we're in right now, and where we can see people acting with integrity and honor when they hold office. So, Mr. Lowenfield, it is incumbent on you to do the right thing. It is incumbent on you to act as you have been so instructed, to present a report that deals only with the recount and those certificates emerging from the recount, and therefore paving the way for the chair to make a declaration. And of course, it goes without saying, if you don't do that, then it may not be you who will be asked to make another report. It might very well be the DCEO. And if it does go in that direction, I hope she's learned from all that has happened so far, and she will not go down a path that has really, really caused so much fragmentation. And I come back to this. I mean, Eddie, you might think I'm belaboring the point, but the fragmentation is terrible. And we have to work on healing this country after all that has gone on. And people should not see each other as enemies. Politics should not make people see each other as enemies. What they need to fight for at the end of the day is democracy, what is right. So I hope everyone is listening, because what I see on social media or what you hear, it's very, very disturbing for the country that must go forward. For all of us who must live here, there's space for everyone. But we would like to see the leaders of the other side do what is right. And I must commend all of the newer parties for the stance they have taken through the entire process. They've been part of everything from, and ended with the recount, and they have not stayed silent. They've all continued to clamor for action to either be taken against Lowenfield or for him to do the right thing. They've been there in the legal battles as well. And I think it is a credit to them that they have seen it all the way through. So this is the kind of environment we have to see going forward, where people should always stand on the side of democracy, especially in a country like ours that has been plagued by election wars too often. I think we should go past that and move on to something better.
Thanks, Dr. Persaud. Joe, I'll give you a chance to wrap up then, Sanjeev.
Viewers, I say, just think about it, throw your mind back. What could have happened to your life in the last 4 months in the PVP in government? Legitimately, the fact that we won the election, so many programs and plans that we have in our manifesto would have already been out there helping the people with their lives. And so you have been robbed, and it has nothing to do with who you voted for. All Guyana, you have been robbed because you have a set of people who wants to hold on to power illegally. I say this, as painful as it is, the trials and tribulation that Vindhya spoke about, in my view, and I have always said, and I continue to say, for the people who are under 35, under 40, I believe with all this pain, it is good for them to see. And Vindhya mentioned about the new parties, and a lot of that, the new parties, they have a lot of young people. What I know is that this experience has taught the young people they're sure on what country they don't want. They don't want. This era has shown them and has caused them to commit themselves to ensure that the country I want, that is the country it will be. And it is important, as painful as it is. And I go back to the point I also always make. It was a useful thing that the PVP lost power in 2015. That no more people like me have to speak to young people about the PNC and power. They're experiencing it, they're living it. I know it's a lot of pain. I know it's a lot of stress. I know it's a lot of agony. But I believe in all of this, it is useful. And for the PNC, APNU AFC supporters, we say to you tonight, you're not our enemies. We don't despise you. We understand that most of you are emotionally entangled and most of you are deceived and allow yourself to be deceived. We hope that you will rise up and recognize, as Vindhya said, you cannot make lies truth. Truth is truth. And that is what we have the last 4 months. On our side, we speak the truth, and on the other side is a lot of lies and deceit. And we would hope that the supporters of the APNU-AFC, they can see through these lies and these deceit, and they can call their leaders to account. We say to you also, you have nothing to fear from the People's Progressive Party Civic in government. Our government will function and work for all the people of Guyana. For us, the elections are over. It should have been over a long time ago. Now it's time for governance. Now it's time to do everything that is possible to help our people, to lift them up out of poverty, to lift them up out of financial strain and stress, so that we can together develop this great country of ours that we call Guyana.
Sanjeev, your closing comments.
Ed, you were saying about Mad Men, and I just wanted to pick up a little bit on that, because this is what we have to accept is what's going on. Of all the changing numbers, and that by my count, there have been 7 different ones, 2 of which match. The recount numbers and the ones that we said were the numbers are approximately the same. Every other version has varied. Now, nobody in APNU, AFC, has complained about these numbers moving up and down. Nobody complained that the first set of numbers that Lowenfield put out gave them 2/3 of the parliament, which means they lost when they went from 2/3 of the parliament to having only 1 seat advantage. They were unconcerned that in one fell swoop, he removed 15% of their votes, and they were unconcerned. They didn't ask a question. There was no clamoring, no protest, no Mr. Lowenfield, why did we lose these votes? Nothing of the sort, because they're unconcerned about the actual numbers. If you look at the narrative of what they're saying, what their leaders are saying, and what their supporters are saying, their supporters are not saying we won the election. Their supporters are saying Lowenfield declared us the winners, and you must swear us in on the basis of that. If that were true, then we don't need to vote anymore. We could ask Lowenfield what numbers he wants in 2025, and we go along with that, because that's effectively all they're concerned about. You have to be under a rock or totally oblivious to reality or the ability to comprehend anything for you not to realize that the coalition lost the election and the PPPC won the election. You have to be devoid of any morality to not know that. And you can see that what they are arguing about has nothing to do with numbers. They have given up on the migrant voters. They have given up on the dead voters. That's not any longer an issue because it has evolved. Their rabid attacks, the vitriol that they direct towards anyone who speaks up, be it Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister Mia Mottley, the Commonwealth, the OAS, CARICOM, the ABCE diplomats, and public officials, secretaries of state, secretaries, the acting prime minister in England, former prime ministers, Golding, Arthur, the Carter Center, the observers that came here, anyone who says anything, they attack. They call you vile names, they insult you, they insult family members. That's been the tactic. Then we have recently, we hadn't heard from Raphael Trotman for some time. And then he comes out and in a very insulting way, he says that if you have 200 or 300 people voting, then you must not have a say. Does that mean that if you only represent 200 or 300 people in a constituency, you have no decency? You have no respect for the rule of law? You have no aspiration to live in a democratic state? These things are non sequiturs. He forgot. Raphael forgot that under Burnham's persecution in the 1980s, his father went to Grenada, and that's where he sought refuge from the persecution in the 1980s of Burnham. His sister lives there. He got married there. His sister lives there. She's married to a Grenadian man who is involved in politics. He was Attorney General at one time. I mean, how could you say things like that are so insulting to your CARICOM neighbors, all because they're telling you, don't rig the damn election. You've been caught. Have some decency and walk. But that's irrelevant to them. Everybody, Ed, has been saying in the most diplomatic terms, in the most polite terms, listen, we catch you trying to rig this election. The whole world knows you're trying to rig the election. You cannot succeed. Everyone knows what you're doing. Everyone knows what you're trying to do. So Mr. Lowenfield takes it upon himself now. He's like Brian Lara of the team or something. Everybody's out. He's the only one that decides him alone will win the game. That's what his intention is, that he will ignore everything. I hate to compare Lowenfield to Lara because that in itself is blasphemy. But the reality is that's what he's trying to do. They have failed at every other attempt So he's going to invent numbers. This is preposterous. When will it end? Now, we have all the doors have been closed. As Joe said, the cards are all now with GCOM, and the CEO has either got to comply, so he either puts up or he shuts up. He needs to comply or get out. And that's what needs to happen. We need to have a public, we demand public officers in this country must stop playing games. Just do your job. It's not that hard. Just do the job that the state has paid you to do. That's all he has to do. Or those charges will have a very different outcome, and an outcome that is very unfavorable to him. So
Thanks.
hopefully he gets the message, and tomorrow we get a surprise.
Sanjeev. Joe Hamilton, Dr. Vindhya, Persaud, I want to thank you very much for being here this evening. We've gone over time by 20 minutes, but that's fine. We've had a lot of stuff to get in tonight, but I want to thank all of you for joining me this evening as we update the Guyanese people and let them understand where we are and the fact that we are very, very close to the end of all of this. And as you always say, Joe, this can only end one way. Democracy and
Thank you for having me, Ed. Good night, Joe. Good night, Vindhya.
Good night, all.
Have
a good night, everybody.
Thank you, Eddie. Good night to all you gentlemen, and good night to those who are watching today's program. Thank you.
Take good care.